Well, we're back for another week of the Limitless Leadership Lounge. I'm John Gehring, joined as always by Dr. Numa Kareem and Coach Jim Johnson. It's a key term that we're talking about this week, and that is servant leadership. It's been thrown around a lot in the personal development and business world. And in the concept of leadership, everybody's been talking about this idea of servant leadership because we know that leadership is not what it once was. But a lot of people still might not quite understand what servant leadership is. And that's what we're going to take a little dive into today. Thanks for joining us. Make sure if you're enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying what you're hearing so far, be sure to leave us a review up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening. And if this is your first time, don't worry about that. Just listen and enjoy and see what you learned today from the three of us. So let's start with Dr. Kareem. Servant leadership. What does it mean to you?
Hi, John. Thank you. Servant leadership. This is a big word that I think three of us are following. And as continuous students of leadership, I found out that humility and leading with heart, these are two things a servant leader should possess. So if I don't have that humility, that I'm not, leadership is not about rank or title. There is a code. And that is what I have seen in some of the leaders who are not effective. They become managers or boss instead of leaders. They are creating like fear, like because I'm the higher ranked person, you should be following me. You should be afraid of me. So it is not about showing power, but it is all about understanding with empathy. That is the heart aspect. Who are you? How can I serve you? So when you have that humility and heart, I think that is when a servant leader can be the most effective individual.
And coach, how about you? How would you define servant leadership? Then we're going to get into the three keys of it.
Sure. So for me, it's flipping the traditional leadership pyramid where for many years it was that the leader's on top and all the team members serve the leader behind. And what I mean by flipping the pyramid is the mindset that as a servant leader, you're on the bottom of the pyramid and your mindset consistently is how do I find ways to serve and grow my people and help them be effective by building a safe environment, but also an environment of accountability. Because we often hear, I get this pushback. Servant leader means soft leadership, and
Mm.
that means you don't understand servant leadership. Servant leadership, there are standards, expectations, there's a mission, all the good things we've been talking about. But at the same time, you're building that structure where that we over me, like Renuma mentioned a little bit, is so essential if you're going to be an effective servant leader.
So if you want to be an effective servant leader, which all leaders should be, because the way leadership is changing nowadays, that's what we need to do. We're going to dive into three keys right now. We each have one of them. It's really convenient. We are a tri-generational conversation here. So let's start back with Coach, and we'll each give a key for you to become a more effective servant leader. Coach, what is key number one?
Well, going with really getting clarity of, for me, a servant leader is that I have to model that. So lead by example. As simple as that is, I always used to tell our players is that you are always on stage and people are watching you. So if you really are emphasizing that you're a servant leader and yet everything you do is command style, you do this and they don't have any understanding, then you are not a servant leader. So the way you model it each day, and one of the things that I talk about is getting to know your people. And to do that, I'm big on acronyms, the CQA, the Chief Question Asker. And then what we mean by that is you should be each day getting out with your people, asking them questions, not only about what they're doing, their job, their role, whatever it is, but also getting to know them as people. In fact, I think a great goal every day as a leader is to get out amongst your people and finds out something new about at least one person every day that's outside of the job or the goal of the team is. And because the better you get to know your people, because the bottom line as a servant leader is it's a very tricky thing, but the best servant leaders, people are held accountable not only by the leader, but by all the team members. but they also feel they're in an environment of safety where they can share their opinions and not be shot down. And so that they're constantly being heard. And if you can do that, then I think, and you can model day in and day out, the famous word, I'll close with it, consistency. People as a leader, they want you to be consistent as a servant leader. And if you're not consistent, now I'll say one caveat, there are times where you have to make a quick judgment and it has to be done. So that's all part of leadership. But the more that you can get your people involved and get them to believe that the we over me concept, I think is really hugely important.
Tip number 1 is lead by example. That is our first key. Good thoughts there, Coach. And Renuma, you have key number 2 to becoming a more effective servant leadership. What is that?
Yeah, well, the second key, I think it is about if you win, I win. That is the major thing about our servant leader. It's not I am winning all the time. And 75%, there is the data, 75% of the employee, they quit job because of the leader, because of the boss. So even in my example, I experience a leader who would, if I try to point out, like these are the things that we can mend to improve, the person would take it as a defensive way, like, oh, are you criticizing me? So I have seen some of the leaders have that attitude, like, oh, my team, why are they criticizing me? I'm in the position, I know it all. You cannot be, as a servant leader, you cannot be, I know it all. To build that community, you have to listen to them, as Coach have mentioned, that you have to listen to them, understand what they need. So what do you need from me? That is the attitude that I have to have as a servant leader. For me, like I'm always giving priorities to my team members. So listening to them, what is happening in their personal life, recognizing their strengths, also identifying, and we often talk about like catch them when they're doing right, mention those things. That's how you start to build that community of and Maxwell also said that you need to build that community first, and you get that loyalty from your team members. And I believe for me, like last year, a lot of things were going on in my personal life. My mother was sick and I had to do all these kind of things. So somehow, which I started that attitude of listening to everybody. In those time, suddenly probably I have missed on that. Like I was not paying attention to some of the team members, and they were later on. I always have a roundup, like after the event, after the programs. Okay, tell me what you think. Where did it work? Where it didn't work? And that is when, because they felt safe to talk about it, I created that environment where everybody feel safe to talk about if they're disgruntled with anything. And if you don't create that environment, you're missing on building that community. So that is when some of my team members, they mentioned that we thought that you were hard on us, you are not listening to us. And that is when I also realized that that was a weakness. Because of the external pressure, I forgot to be that leader I was always, that earned me that loyalty. Like till 2017, my team members, they don't get paid or anything, but they're sticking with me and giving the 100%, because it's because of me, and they care about the cause. So you need to build that community with a sense of purpose among everybody, listen to them, as Coach mentioned, and again, you win, try to make them win, and that is when the whole team will win. And I think that is the service, one of the principles of a servant leader.
John, can I just say one thing? Because Renuma said such a powerful thought, is the fact that, servant leaders are not that I know it all. The servant leader is someone that consistently says, I'm a learn it all, not an I'm a know it all.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You've both brought out some very powerful points. Lead by example is Coach's point, key number 1. Key number 2 for Renuma, talking about that we over me concept that we talk about a lot, the you win, I win concept.
Mm-hmm.
And key number 3, finally, I'm going to touch on quickly, is building a culture It's a key hot term, right? Is now what's your team culture of two things: vulnerability and accountability. And they seem
Mhm.
like they are opposed to one another, but they're not. Building a culture of vulnerability is so important because I remember a leader early on in my career and they saw I was having a bad day. I didn't say anything, but they just kind of noticed, oh, you're having a bad day, John. What's going on? Let me make you coffee. They were the leader. They made me coffee that day. What about the stereotype of the intern is supposed to make the coffee, right? That's all I did in my internship. I made coffee. Well, no, this leader actually made coffee for me, one of their teammates. And that was all because of the vulnerability. That really opened up this idea of I can be vulnerable. But then on the flip side, when you build a culture of vulnerability and you encourage people to be okay with having a bad day or be okay making a mistake, then you open yourself up to the opportunity of a culture of accountability, because now
Mm.
we're not fearing the wrath of God when we make when we make a mistake, right? These consequences we don't feel like they're going to come down hard on us, so we need to try to hide all of our mistakes. When you build a culture of vulnerability, therefore you also build a culture of accountability. So that I think is a solid key number 3. So again, we have these 3 really central keys here to becoming a better servant leader: leading by example, we over me, that team mindset that Dr. Kareem touched on, and then building this culture of vulnerability and accountability. I know we couldn't narrow it down totally to 3. There's 3 of us, so it worked out nicely. But there are, for lack of better terms, some honorable mentions, some concepts that probably should have made the list, but we didn't get the chance to fit them in. So let's start with Coach and then go to Renuma. What are some things that we may not have said yet that are important for servant leaders to know?
Well, actually, John, yours was a really valuable point, is the vulnerability and accountability. And so I just want to actually augment about the fact that about both of those. So number one, vulnerability is servant leaders, like all leaders, make mistakes. But what servant leaders do is they admit their mistakes, and when they need to, they share all the time that I made a mistake, and sometimes they need to apologize, and that's okay. That's showing their vulnerability, that they're human, and the what I always tried to do is I wanted to do what's best for the team. And if I made a decision and it ended up not being best for the team, I was right there to say that was my mistake, and we need to correct this and look to get feedback. And then from the accountability standpoint, I think as a leader, it's hugely important you do 2 things. Number one, that you praise specifically. So instead of saying, nice job, Johnny or Susie, it's, Johnny, that was awesome how you dove on the floor for that loose ball. That's what championship players do on championship teams. Because what is clearly praised is going to get repeated because people love that. But on the other side of it, again, because sometimes you hear that servant leadership is soft leadership, is not at all. You're holding people accountable. So therefore, you have to correct them. But when you correct them, remember, you're correcting the action, not, attacking the person. And secondly, painting that clear picture of what the expectation is. So, for example, if I get mad at one of my players that they didn't hustle back, and then they say, well, I did hustle back. Well, then I do 2 things. I show them film of them when they didn't hustle back, because the film doesn't lie. And then I show them a time when they did hustle back. So they have a clear picture of what the expectation and how they can correct it moving forward.
Right. And I think another one is people over profit. Many who are listening to our podcast are from different businesses. And I have seen sometime when the leader is focusing too much or fully on, like, I need the numbers. We have to maintain the profits. And that is when also you tend to lose that team essence of the team. First, you have to serve your employee or the team you're working with, not the customers directly. The people who are directly helping the customers. First, deal with your employee or team members. And then when you are treating them nicely, automatically the cycle will be perfect. But I have seen, like, I went to a local bank in our country in Bangladesh, And we see that everybody is criticizing the leader because they're like, he's always criticizing us and this and that, and they are showing their anger on the customers. They're not giving 100%. And while there was another organization, BTI, where I saw the CEO, he is creating the culture of learning. There are like development sessions. He's creating, he has that empathy, like, okay, what do you need? How can I help you to grow? When he had those attitude, automatically the members of the BDI are also serving their customers to their best. So it is like, as you have mentioned, like like example, you have to put that example in, and then you have to care about your employees, which will create that chain of humility and empathy. So those are some of the major things that I've observed that is so much needed in this crazy world today.
Yep. Servant leadership is definitely something that we all should take on and intentionally think about. An intentional plan to try and become a
Mm.
better servant leader. We gave 3 key examples. You can find those in the show notes and listen to the episode again if you want to reiterate those. Also, be sure to share this episode with anyone you think would value from becoming a better servant leader. And certainly that doesn't mean share it with your boss if he or she is a jerk. But I guess you could, right? I guess you always could.
Right.
But everybody can work on servant leadership. Even good leaders can become better leaders by becoming better servant leaders. So those 3 tips and those additional ones that we covered are key. Did we miss any? We'd love to hear from you too. Let us know up on social media. Dr. Kareem, Coach Jim Johnson, or me, John Gehring. You can find us on wherever you're on social media. And then we'll be back next week with another great guest to kick off the next month. Actually, July, we're heading into already. This summer is flying. So we'll be back next week for another episode of the Limitless Leadership Lounge.